Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. We're looking at my spreadsheet called Timeline Phrases. I'm still in the process of updating this with the numbers from the October 2025 General Conference. Uh, I'm not sure when I'm going to have that done. I started updating it and then I stopped and made a video to point out a few things. Well, earlier today, I had a phrase come to mind, the number of. These days, I feel like I've pretty much searched everything that I could think of that would have to do with the second coming or relate to the future of the church, things related to the second coming. But occasionally, every now and again, there is a new phrase that comes to mind. And I think that this one is pretty interesting. So let's talk about this. And then hopefully in the near future, I'll have the whole spreadsheet updated. But and in case you're new, what this is, it's a tally of the number of general conference talks by year that include these words or phrases, either in the body of the talk or in the footnotes. So for example, the number of that phrase showed up in 2 general conference talks in 2025 between both general conferences. Okay, so right off the bat, the first thing that I noticed is that there was a spike in 2018 relative to the other years. 2018, 2013, and then the mid to late 70s, and then the early 60s. And this is something that we keep seeing time and time and time again. These numbers that have to do with church growth, which is related to preparing for the second coming, preparing a people that are ready to receive the Lord when he comes again. These phrases that have to do with the second coming, we see this over and over again, where there's a spike during President Nelson's presidency, and then you typically see it usually around the 70s. Sometimes it spills into the early 80s. Sometimes it's the late 60s or just in the 60s in general. And just so you can kind of see this, here's a quick example. Here's the phrase second coming. Just look at the dark colors and you can tell that there was a big spike during President Nelson's presidency in the usage of this term. It goes from this light pink color with 3 in 2017 all the way up to 8 during his first year. And then it spikes in the year 2020 with 12. Okay, when you go back in time, that's one of our big spikes for second coming. The only other time that you see a spike like that or anything approaching it is in the 70s. And like I said, it kind of spills into the 60s. There is one here in 1958, so kind of like the late 50s, early 60s, but mostly centered on the 70s. And that's what you see for the number of. It's not as dramatic, but it's related. And if we were to go through all the different words and phrases that I've searched, which are many, I could show you many other examples, but we're not really going to focus on that in this video. Just want to quickly point that out. So now what I would like to do is the 2 most dramatic spikes for the number of is this one in the early 60s and then the one during President Nelson's first year as president of the church. So what are they talking about? Well, let's go to the Scripture Citation Index, which lets you search the scriptures as well as general conference talks for words and phrases. This is how I gathered all this data. And let's just take a quick look at the year 1961. Let me just read some of these excerpts right here. Let's see. In France and the Netherlands, the number of baptisms are also greatly increased. Let's see. In this one, in the increase of the number of new houses of worship. Okay. Let's see this one. Realizing this new era, the leaders of the church are doubling the number of full-time missionaries. and more stake in district missionaries are being called today than ever. And then it continues. The next one, the number of missionaries has increased from 150 to 500. Let's see. As I've seen what is being accomplished, I've been very much interested in knowing the number of converts we have in Great Britain from January 1st, 1960 to August 31st, 1960. Okay. So it's all that kind of thing, as you would expect. It has to do with the growth of the church, right? And so it makes sense if we go back to this and we look at 2013, although I'm not going to pull up these talks. This is the year after the mission age was lowered, which was in 2012. And interestingly, we don't have any mention of this phrase in 2012. From 1959 all the way until present, this phrase is used at least once a year, with the exception of 2012, when the mission age was lowered. I don't know if this has anything to do with that. Like somehow, the wording for talks that year were affected because it's like, oh, we have this coming out. And I don't know, but I think that's kind of odd. And then the only other year is 2024. And that's kind of odd. I feel like 2024 was an important year because that was the year of President Nelson's big Second Coming talk. I really think that was a landmark talk in the history of the church. Given that he was so focused on the Second Coming, that was his second to last talk before he passed away. He told this point blank period, now's the time to get ready for the Second Coming. So I don't know that it's related, but those are interesting years for this to not show up. You see. Oh, and one more thing I should point out. Before 1955, you have this really odd gap between 1946 and 1948 where it's not used at all. It's not actually too odd because that's what you see across the board for the most part with anything having to do with the Second Coming. You can kind of see it right here in column D for Second Coming. Essentially, from 1942 to 1957, there's not a whole lot, with the exception of 1953. So that's part of this pattern. I don't know why that is. I feel like there were a lot of things going on in the 70s. Everything from the recent 6-day war in Israel, which was a really big deal. That's when Israel captured Jerusalem. And so maybe that was an indication that, hey, prophecy is being fulfilled. Now the Jews literally have possession of the city and the Gentiles are not in control of it. It's not being trodden underfoot of the Gentiles. I mean, it is, but now it's under Israel's control, the Jews. The number of temples started to increase in the 70s. And so that may have something to do with it. And there could be a lot of other things. We've talked about all the things that have taken place in Missouri. The church did a lot of work with purchasing land here in Missouri, specifically Adamandayaman, building the Independence Visitor Center. Those are just my thoughts. But anyway, let's go ahead and let's see what was being talked about in 2018 when it comes to the phrase, the number of. I just pulled up a few examples. So we'll start out with President Nelson himself. This is the October 2018 General Conference opening remarks. And he says, "We are overjoyed with the number of our youth who have joined the Lord's Youth Battalion to help gather scattered Israel." So this has to do with missionary work. And this was a unique concept introduced by President Nelson, the Lord's Youth Battalion. And I think he really meant it. I really think he was identifying a special group of youth, a special generation. And I think that this generation that he's referring to, I think they are the last ones to do missionary work before the Second Coming. And then that they're going to be the transition team. They're going to be the first ones to do missionary work in the millennium. It's like the transition team. We know from the October 2022 General Conference in his talk called Overcome the World and Find Rest that one of the main purposes of gathering scattered Israel is to prepare a people who are ready, willing, and worthy to receive the Lord when he comes again. So this has everything to do with the second coming. Okay, let's go to this one. This is also October 2018. And this one is President Oaks. He used this phrase, and look what he said in section 1 of his talk. Children are our most precious gift from God, our eternal increase. Yet we live in a time when many women wish to have no part in the bearing and nurturing of children. Many young adults delay marriage until temporal needs are satisfied. The average age of our church members' marriages has increased by more than 2 years. And the number of, there it is, and the number of births to church members is falling. The United States and some other nations face a future of too few children maturing into adults to support the number of retiring adults. Over 40% of births in the United States are to unwed mothers. Those children are vulnerable. Each of these trends works against our Father's divine plan of salvation. Well, I think that this is, along with many other talks, I think that this is a preview of what we're going to see during President Oak's presidency. He's already spoken about this in the last General Conference, which at that time it was the Apostolic Interregnum. He was not yet officially the president of the church, but that is what his talk was about. It was all about the family and raising children. I think we'll see more of it, but okay. So let's move on to, this is also October 2018, Gathered Together in One, All Things in Christ by Elder Bednar. And he goes through this kind of like timeline of church growth. And at this part, he says, as the number of stakes increased, the need was intensified for member homes to become places where family members loved to be, where they could enrich their lives and find mutual love, support, appreciation, and encouragement. Consequently, in 1980, Sunday meetings were consolidated into a 3-hour block to, quote unquote, re-emphasize personal and family responsibility for learning, living, and teaching the gospel. So all the things that he mentions here has to do with a growing church, right? And just recently, we just learned that there's no longer going to be the Saturday evening session of General Conference. And I feel like it goes along with this. It's continuing. Later on, he says, I believe that the sequence and timing of these actions over many decades can help us to see one united and comprehensive work and not just a series of independent and discrete initiatives. Yeah, that's important to point out. I should have highlighted that. So it's one united and comprehensive work and not just a series of independent and discrete initiatives. I think sometimes that's how people view it. They think that it's just something temporary, or it's like, oh, we need to change things up a little bit. No, it's part of a big thing that's taking place for the church and ultimately in preparation for the second coming. And I think for a much, much larger church, you have to prepare for that. Okay. Quote, God has revealed a pattern of spiritual progress for individuals and families through ordinances, teaching, programs, and activities that are home-centered and church-supported. That's a key phrase. And that's probably going to become even more important as the church gets bigger. Church organizations and programs exist to bless individuals and families and are not ends in themselves. I pray we can recognize the Lord's work as one great worldwide work that is becoming ever more home-centered and church-supported. I know and testify that the Lord is revealing and, quote, will yet reveal many great and important things pertaining to the kingdom of God, end quote. Let's go back to this. So we know that we've seen a lot of spikes during President Nelson's presidency. It's going to be really interesting to see what this ends up looking like during President Oak's time. Now, I'm going to be honest. One of the reasons why I haven't updated this sooner is because there wasn't a whole lot said this last general conference that I feel would make for anything exciting on this spreadsheet. I could be wrong. I'm not going to be able to really say until I complete it. But now that he's president of the church, because I don't know that he wanted to do anything too big during the apostolic interregnum, it's just going to be interesting to see what happens during his presidency. Is the trend going to continue with the second coming talk? Are we going to see additional spikes? Are we going to see spikes in different categories for different topics? I don't know. Something to think about. But all of this is the Lord's work. He's the one that's guiding the church. And so, I don't know. Maybe there will be a spike. Maybe it's going to continue. Maybe it'll spike even more because we're getting closer to the second coming. Okay, just two more. This one's from April 2018. Behold, a Royal Army by Elder Ronald A. Rasband. And, oops, I guess I passed it. Okay, right here. Throughout our life, Sister Rasband and I have traveled the world on various church and professional assignments. I have seen nearly every type of unit configuration in the church. A small branch in Russia, where the number of Melchizedek priesthood holders could be counted on one hand. A new and growing ward in Africa, where both high priests and elders met as a single body because the overall number of Melchizedek priesthood holders was low. And in well-established wards where the number of elders required the dividing of their quorum into two quorums. This one's interesting because he just points out that the church is all over the world and it does have to have different configurations, quote unquote, based on the number of people there. But we're living in a time where there is a branch in Russia, and Africa is really starting to come alive when it comes to religion. Not just in our church, but in other churches too. But we've had a stunning number of temples announced for Africa, and I know growth over there is it's at a really high level. Okay, and then the last one I want to share, this is April 2018, Prepare to Meet God by Elder Quentin L. Cook. He says, we are grateful that many more members are preparing to go to the temple. There's been a significant increase in the number of worthy adult temple recommend holders for many years. Limited use recommends for worthy youth have increased dramatically over the last 2 years. Clearly, the faithful core membership of the church has never been stronger. And if anything, since 2018, I think it's gotten even stronger from everything that we've read on this channel. One of my favorite things is recently here in the Kansas City area, we had the outgoing Elder Jeremiah Morgan. He did like after his 5-year calling for this area, he did an outgoing message. And he said that for all 9 metrics that the church measures for growth, that the Kansas City area has met all those metrics, including, I think he mentioned temple activity, worthy adult temple recommend holders and youth, and everything seems to be on the increase, both in the Kansas City area and also throughout the church. So yeah, 2018, I don't think there's any mistake or coincidence about this, that there was so much of this kind of talk during President Nelson's first year as president of the church. 2016 is going to be really interesting. I'm excited to see how those numbers turn out. But it's really clear. It's really clear that there are patterns. And when it comes to the Second Coming, it seems like from 1942 until present, the two key periods are one, centered on the 70s, and then number two, centered on President Nelson's presidency, and most likely into President Oak's, but we'll have to see. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.